Welcome to our next session. This conversation centers around organizational culture. Again, this is a very critical part of you as a leader, you as a manager, understanding how things work in your organization. So we're going to give you foundational theory and then dig into the edge on some people that are having a somewhat unique perspective on culture and how it operates. At the beginning, we need to understand that culture really is the unwritten side of our organization. It's sort of the taboos, the subtle messages that are passed between people. And when you come to work or when you take on a new position, nobody gives you a handbook that says, this is our culture and this is how you need to operate. Your foundational theory, when you're getting prepared as a manager or leader, suggests that you read Edgar Schein's books. He really is the godfather of organizational culture, and he will give you a perspective that helps you understand a bit of what's going on, and his work is the foundation of some of the models and theories that I'm going to be sharing with you. So again, you take a look at his metaphor of culture as an iceberg, that you see the behaviors that your workforce is engaging in, your peers engaging in, even your boss is engaging in, but underneath those behaviors are shared values and a set of assumptions. So we're going to talk a bit about how all this operates. So culture, again, is a shared set of beliefs and values within the organization that really determines how people behave. It sets the rules in the organization, oftentimes the unpublished rules. It establishes the norms. What are the standards of behavior within our organization? It sets what is expected of you, not just on your performance review, but what people expect from you behaviorally and performance-wise. It establishes a sense of how an organization feels. And as you develop as a manager and leader, you're going to be able to literally walk through a department or an area and you're going to get a sense of that organization's culture just by the feeling you pick up. And it also establishes an organization's overall identity. So why is culture so important? As you go through the literature and you read deeper in that, you're going to see that culture is what leads when you're not there. So managing your culture, establishing a culture that works for you, that's the hidden manager, that's the hidden leader that operates in an organization. Peter Anderson, one of the deep thinkers over at Sutter Health, made a very interesting comment in a meeting that I was in. And he said that his culture or their culture is more powerful than the best strategy his team of really smart people can develop. And to change the overall direction of an organization, you must change its culture. So organizational leaders in large organizations and small organizations take culture very seriously. So how is a culture created? How can you create or change a culture? So as you look at these comments, think about, all right, I've now taken on this organization or I've taken on this job. How do I start to shift the way that things are done? First of all is you have to have a clear purpose or mission statement. So why is it that you're here? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is your end state? And you want to make that very clear from the day you establish yourself as a new manager or a new leader. Then you take a look at the stories that are shared about the organization and about how people behave in the organization. One of the articles that you can find focuses exclusively on if you want to change an organization, change the stories. So change who is the heroine, what behaviors made her a heroine. Take a look at the rituals that occur within the organization. Some are formal, some are informal, but you need to have a series of rituals that support the culture that you want to embed in the organization. You want to take a look at the visibles, and we're going to get in a little deeper on the concept of artifacts. But you pay attention to what your website looks like. You pay attention to what your business stationery and business cards look like. You take a look at how your organization is physically laid out. You pay attention to the language that's used in the organization and also what is not said. We want to pay attention to you as a leader. Your behavior, your actions are going to help shape and change an organization. How do you go about making decisions? Where is your attention focused? Where do you spend your time? How do you train and develop folks in your organization? Many organizations now are starting to take the idea of socialization very critically. They're bringing people into almost a week-long boot camp to introduce them to the organization's culture and values. And they're unabashed at, this is what we stand for, this is how we do things. Your performance appraisal system also is an indicator of your culture. What you reward is the behaviors you're going to get. So again, you want to change your culture, take a look at what you're rewarding both formally and informally. What is it that you're rewarding? So now you measured people's behaviors, their outcomes. How are you promoting people? How are you giving bonuses? All these are signals to the people in the organization on the core values of your culture. And then even your organizational chart is an indicator of what your culture is like. So who reports to who has what authority, who has what power, all that's an indicator of your underlying culture. Within the organization, not only do you have a macro culture, but there's a set of subcultures that develop within an organization. When we get into the leading edge, we're going to talk a bit about Dave Logan's work down at USC and his concept of tribes. But organizations generally will form around smaller groups and set up their own subculture within your macro culture. The challenge for you as a manager or leader is to make certain that your organization's core values are also embedded in these organizations' subcultures. Because it's at this micro level, this granular level, where people take a look at their perception of the organization, they take a look at how they're supposed to behave, and then they adjust their behaviors accordingly. In some cases, you can have a counterculture develop within your organization. And again, as a manager, as a leader, we have to pay attention to this, because a counterculture will develop a set of values and beliefs and behaviors that operate contrary to the culture that you're trying to embed. So be mindful of that. Usually a counterculture is being led around a charismatic leader. And it usually is a disgruntled worker who perceived that they were treated poorly, and then they tend to draw fellowship around them, and they then start to view your dominant culture, your management structure as the enemy. So how do we measure an organization's culture? You're coming in as a brand new manager, and you're trying to figure out, okay, I got to make some sense of this. It's absolute chaos. What frameworks can I use? A good starting point is to go back to Shine's work. And he said, we want to take a look at core assumptions, we want to look at values, and then we want to take a look at artifacts. All that'll give us a clue as to what is important within the organization that we now are responsible for. So let's take a look at each of these in a little bit more detail. The observable artifacts are very critical because they're a regular reminder of the people in the organization on what their culture is. There's a reason why buildings are built the way that they are. You'll find most financial institutions want to project a sense of stability. Their buildings project that sense of ability. You'll take a look at how people dress within the organization, what the myths and stories are. All those, as you become a seasoned manager and leader, you're going to start to almost develop an unconscious perception of this and then trust that to help you get some clues as to what's important to the organization. And then you can just observe the behaviors within an organization. All these are artifacts of the core of the organization. How managers treat the people they're responsible for, how employees treat each other. All those are going to be great signals to you to help you develop an understanding of what the culture stands for. So again, artifacts are highly visible. We can observe them, we can start to map them, and become a very thoughtful manager or leader. Moving down to a deeper level, there's a set of values that people within your organization hold. And there's values that are espoused. They're what people say, what they talk about, and they tend to be divided into two categories. One is instrumental, one is terminal. Again, those are academic terms, so let's put them into a language that people will actually understand and use. So instrumental values really are how things are done or how things get done. We show up to meetings on time. We do work this particular way. We're very meticulous in how we do things. All those are the instrumental values. And then at a deeper level are terminal values. And terminal values are why things are being done. This is at the heart, literally the heart or the emotional side of workers. And we do some interesting work where we run surveys within a work team and have them set forth in an instrument, their instrumental values and terminal values. And we talk a lot about if there's conflict in the instrumental side, we can deal with that. Because how we get things done, there's a lot of ways to get things done, and we can work on that. Where there's deep conflict within a team or within a culture is when their terminal values are not aligned. I have the privilege, as I've said before, of working in healthcare, and the vast majority of the people in those institutions are there to care for patients. Those are terminal values. They want to help people. So somebody that comes into that culture with a terminal value of maximization of profit, self-enrichment, you get an idea of why there's going to start to be a collision between those people within that organizations. And then there's enacted values. That is how we behave, how we act out in response to a challenge that's in front of us. And I use the example, of course we need patience, but the really important thing around here is hitting our metrics, whatever it happens to be. So then you can get into a conflict there where the enacted values may be contrary to somebody who's holding a core value of patients are most important, to somebody whose values are we have to operate our hospital system in a very profitable manner. And then there's basic assumptions. Now we're at the real core of people within the organizations. So we have core values that lead to a set of assumptions on how the world works. So our core values give us an indication. Some of these are so embedded that they're very, very difficult to change. And you'll see that when people are put under stress and you start to map out why did they make a decision a certain way, you'll find that they were acting in alignment with their assumptions about how things work. So an assumption may be that the best way for an organization to become profitable and be successful is to reduce costs. So we'll shed staff, we'll eliminate the softer side of the organization. Again, that's an action based on a core assumption. Another way to take a look at it is William Ochi down at UCLA was there for years, and many, many years ago he wrote a book called Theory Z, and he provided what I think is a very helpful discussion point. And he did a 2x2 grid, and in one grid where there's high stability and high degree of internal focus and not a great deal of integration, is very hierarchical. So you can have a culture within your organization that focuses on efficiency. Along the stability grid with also a more of an external focus is an organization whose culture is very market sensitive. You have some cultures that are hyper market sensitive to where they're looking at what a customer or a patient doesn't even know they need, and that is the space that they want to operate in. So hierarchical, very internal in their focus, market, very external. Then there's a collaborative side where you're looking within the organization deeply, and you're trying to find stability through collaboration. So you're operating more like a family with a high degree of trust, loyalty. And then up in the upper grid, where again we have a lower degree of internal focus and a high degree of external focus, and we're comfortable being uncomfortable. He used the term an adhocracy, where the lines of power and authority aren't particularly clearly delineated. There you see a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, and to some that's a bit of chaos, which makes many managers and leaders uncomfortable. There's another instrument, the organizational cultural profile, that O'Reilly and his team came up with, and he said, well, we can map our organization culture in 7 dimensions: innovation, aggressiveness, outcome-oriented, stability, people-oriented, team-oriented, detail-oriented. And he sees that the organizational cultural profile is somewhere, if you were to take the little bubble and extend it out on a continuum, hyper-aggressive, lower degree of aggressiveness, you could come up with a nice little map that shows a very rigorous profile of your organizational culture using those dimensions, which is kind of a very interesting tool. You can create, they have an instrument where you can map them and come up with some pretty cool visual representations of what your culture looks like. Kotter, who again is a common theme within our conversations, lays out how do we change an organization. So we talked about this in our change management conversation. But again, you're not going to get change to occur until there's a sense of urgency. Remember, we talked about Lewin and his unfreezing. So we're not going to get a culture to start to shift until we have people understanding what's going on. And then we can go through the various stages. And you'll see number 6, even on Kotter's work, which aligns with Shine's work, you have to create new stories and new symbols, different reward systems. All of those things have to start to change. But the impetus for driving change in an organizational culture is creating that energy, that sense of urgency. So let's take a look out on the edge and see what some of the thinkers are doing that maybe disrupt us. Jay Lorsch has a very interesting concept. This is an article in Harvard Business Review that just came out this year. And he said that culture is not something that you can have an organizational development or human resources program or your internal communication folks create through bumper stickers and poster campaigns. He said the way that a culture is created or changed is the way that it implements a new strategy or a new set of policies and a new set of procedures. A new way of doing business is going to force change within the culture. So it just flips everything on its head. It said instead of being artful and looking deep at the people and the other factors, he says no, that today things are changing so fast, it's so dynamic, that responding to our environment today is going to force people to change behaviors and will change our cultures. So again, you get some tension. That's what I love about this field. There's no one answer. Our job as managers and leaders is to look across. Coming out of USC, it's required that I cite a USC author at least once per lecture, or they're going to take back my degrees. So my USC token theor today is Dave Logan and his team's work. But he introduced the concept of tribal leadership. And I love this because it says that within our organization, get over yourself. If you're the CEO of a 50,000 people company, you're going to have multiple tribes operating within your company. And your job is to accept the fact that you're going to have multiple tribes. And your job as a leader is to create a council for your tribes to come together to make sure that they have a common sense of values and agreement on the direction, and give up the concept of micromanaging your organization, because humans just are hardwired to do things differently. And he said that you're going to have your tribes operating at different levels, different stages. And I really like this because if you read his book, it gets you into a pretty good analysis of your culture. He said at stage 1, the general mood within that tribe is despair and hostility. Their theme is life sucks. If they move to stage 2, they become more apathetic and victim-like. And their theme is, well, just my life sucks. Life in general doesn't, but my life in the organization sucks. Stage 3, people are moving towards a more positive view of the world. They're the lone warrior, and their theme is, I'm great, but you're not. So you have a whole bunch of lone wolves operating within your organization. Stage 4 is sort of where the ideal space to operate is tribal pride. And their theme is, we as a organization or a department are great, and by the way, you're not. But at least there's a high degree of cohesion within that group. And then occasionally you'll have people move out of stage 4 into 5, and there the mood is really innocent wonderment. Oh my goodness, there are some amazing things that we can do. Let's figure out how we can do that. And the theme within that tribe is, life is great, life is good, but it requires a tremendous amount of energy to operate in that space. As a leader, Logan says, let them slide back into stage 4 and then move up occasionally into stage 5. So you have the foundations, the blocking and tackling of culture, and some perspective on the cutting edge. So thanks for listening to this particular conversation.